Here's a quick cleat I installed across the forward edge of the beam to support this little flat deck area. This is just secured with epoxy and 3 screws. That's all that needs to be. Next big task is to epoxy coat the entire interior of this boat. Planning 2 coats, both done in the same day, and it'll just make everything more durable. So I've just spent a little time vacuuming and solvent washing everything you see here, and this is ready to go. I'm going to start early in the day tomorrow and get 1 coat on, and then later in the day I'll come back and do the 2nd coat. It'll be similar to these bulkheads, which have 1 coat on them already. I did that before installation, if you remember, some weeks back. And I'll also epoxy coat this outboard bracket. And while I'm at it with the inside of the hull, I'll also coat the underside of these 2 deck panels. That way those will be ready to sand and paint as well. This is the outboard well platform, which is going to get 1 layer of 6-ounce cloth on its top surface. This is the little foredeck that goes forward of the birdwatcher slot. And I'm also going to sheathe the top side of that, the visible surface side. This is the first coat of epoxy on the inside of the hull. It's all the sides, hull sides, whatever framing members I can, and the bulkheads. The floor or sole will have to wait. I'll do a coat on that when I back my way out of here when I do the 2nd coat. Just a roller and a quick tip off with a 2-inch brush, just to get the smoothest surface possible. I'm not going for a gloss coat or anything like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I don't want runs or sags, so it'll be hard to sand out. 2nd coat will cover all the hull, but I'm probably not going to do the bulkheads again because they already have 2 coats on them now because of the 1st coat that I put on before I installed them. I left this top rail on the aftermost bulkhead for now so that I can climb over. I'll coat that once more when I back my way out after the second coat. Transom, all this area has been done except for the floor, the bottom, which I'll do at the end. Got one coat on the outboard bracket. I forgot to do the inside of the anchor well here. I'll do a coat on that when I come back for the second coat. I've thrown away all my rollers and stuff, so I don't have anything going now to finish it. I just noticed it was not done. That looks good. Took under 2 hours to do all of this, plus the undersides of the decks and a couple of pieces that I glassed that I'm going to show you right now. Here are the two deck panels, bottom side up. Got a coat of epoxy on them. I'll do one more when I come back for the second coat. The outboard well and the foredeck, the small foredeck piece, have received one layer of 6-ounce cloth here. And I will come back and fill coat this when I do the second coat of epoxy on the rest of the hull. This is the second and final coat of epoxy on the inside of the hull. And one coat on the entirety of the floor / sole that I did on my way out. All surfaces inside the boat are now coated. When this is cured, I will sand it. And then we'll assess and get ready for high build primer. And this time I remembered to get a coat on the anchor well all over. This looks good. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't too bad. Didn't take that long, but I'm tired of it now. This is the second coat of epoxy on the undersides of these two deck panels. Applied just like the first. Roller and tip off with a brush. This is the fill coat of epoxy over the fiberglass cloth on the outboard well and the little foredeck section. Good heavy coat. These are flat, so it's easy to get a heavy coat on there. After the epoxy coating had plenty of cure time, I started off by water washing the entire surface and then got to work sanding it with 80 and then 120 grit. I know I show you a lot of sanding on this build. There's just no way around the sanding. It's got to be done, so you get to see it. I found the epoxy was a little harder to sand than I expected. It tended to gum up the paper very quickly, which made the process slow. I had to clean off the paper so I could get some use out of it, and it was just a lot more work than I was anticipating, which made it a long and frustrating day. But eventually I got all the sanding done, did a little bit of cleanup, called it good for then because I was pretty tired. It was 3.5 solid hours of sanding to get through the boat. It's a new day today, and this is what it looks like after the sanding. I haven't cleaned up the boat yet. That's one of my tasks today. But I've sanded it basically smooth and removed the gloss from the epoxy. And this should be the final prep before high build primer. Once I get this cleaned up, I'll go around, and if there's any touch-up sanding I have to do, any corners where maybe I didn't get completely, I won't be able to tell that until I get it cleaned up. So that's today's first order of business. So here's how this looks after cleaning up, vacuuming. I have not solvent washed yet because I've got some touch-up sanding to do. No sense getting it all cleaned when I'm just going to sand again. Here in the motor well area, this area underneath the cleats, I left as is. I did not sand that because that's the final finish in that space. That's going to be covered and out of sight, so I just want the epoxy in there for protection. Everything else is sanded and now vacuumed, and it's highlighted just a few little areas where I have to do a little touch-up sanding. It's usually in places like this, alongside this tabbing. I'll just have to get a piece of hand sandpaper and rough that up so it's no longer shiny. That's the main thing. I don't want any shine. Otherwise, I'm content with this. It's basically smooth and flat and more than good enough for the primers that are coming after it. So on another day, I'll go around with a piece of sandpaper and just take care of a few shiny areas. You can see one down there on the floor right there. Just a few little spots like that, to be expected. Can't see that well when I'm sanding, and dust everywhere. There's a bare spot on the sole right there. That's a spot where there was actually a screw from one of the I have a new name for those things on the bottom that I can never pronounce. I had somebody write to me and suggest the word stiffeners for those instead of skids/stiffeners that I was always struggling over, and it was never a great name anyway. So stiffeners is what we're going to be calling those now. That was a screw tip from one of those that actually came through. So I just sanded that down a little bit. I'll put a little epoxy in there and fill that up. The anchor well locker, sanded in there. That'll probably need a little hand sanding as well. So that's where we ended up. Today I still need to go and sand my two deck panels that go up here and the motor well cover. So I didn't sand those yesterday when I did the interior of the boat. I had hopes to and expected to, and this just took way too long. Here's the outboard well platform and the little tiny foredeck section. Now sanded, epoxy coated and sanded through 120. I missed filming it. I set up the camera and aimed it and forgot to hit the go button, but you didn't miss much. 80 and 120 grit paper. Bring this down nice and smooth. And these are the deck panels, now sanded through 120 grit, just to clean up and smooth the epoxy coating. It's 2 coats of epoxy, and these are ready to go for high build primer. And a little shiny spot there, but I'll touch them up once I solvent wash. This spot right here that I'm rubbing definitely is still a little shiny, but not a big deal. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'm extremely happy to be virtually done with the epoxy sanding in here. That was an unpleasant day. 120 is where I wanted this to end up for primer, high build primer. And that's the next major step on this. So everything from here until then will just be geared towards making that happen on the interior. I wanted to get 2 or 3 or whatever, however many coats I can on this mahogany gunnel, just for protection and to start the build-up process since it takes a while. So I masked off the rail top and bottom, and then I applied a heavily thinned mix of varnish and thinner, approximately 50-50, just as a sealer coat to soak into the wood. There are a few more satisfying things than putting the first coat of varnish on a nice piece of wood like this mahogany. So I started off with some detail sanding around some of the corners and the hard edges of the tabbing. They aren't that hard, but hard enough that a sander went over them and left a little bit of glossy space. And so I've sanded all of those areas by hand just to get some scratch marks in there. And with that done, I went ahead and vacuumed and solvent washed the entire interior of the boat, which is now essentially ready for primer. First layer of primer, which is a high build primer, epoxy based. And that'll be the next step on this. There's a couple little things to do before that for prep, some masking and some other prep, but otherwise this interior is ready to go. It's clean. It'll get cleaned again before the paint, but it's clean now. It's basically clean enough, but I will go over it once more and with a tack rag because it may get some dust on it when I finish up the prep. So that'll be the last thing I do before paint. I'd love to have one of those Mission Impossible rigs so that I could just sort of hang here and float above the boat and spray at will, but I don't have one of those. Sadly, I'm going to have to figure out another way. I think my approach, because of the way this boat is set up, is I'm going to step into the boat and spray all the sides and so forth from inside the boat, 3 coats. And when that's done, I'll spray the remainder, which will mostly be the sole. And I'm pretty sure I can do the floor effectively enough from up here, standing outside the boat where I am right here, reach down and spray. It's not perfect, but I think that'll work. It's going to have to work because that's how I'm going to do it. Following high build will be a regular primer and then finally top coat. So the next stages from here are some masking, and I've got to set up my flat panels in the other room so that I can spray those as well. I've set up the various flat panels here on the other side of the shop, which conveniently is empty at the moment. These panels are now washed off and ready to go. I need to mask in between these lines. This is where it will bear on structural members when installed. I don't want to paint those areas. I want to leave them the way they are. So I'll mask those areas. These are the 2 deck panels. And then over here, we've got the outboard well panel and the little foredeck. And these will get sprayed along with the interior of the hull. Put a little dab of fairing compound on that spot where I had to drill out the protruding screw tip from one of the stiffeners underneath. I've started the masking process for the interior with this outboard well. This bottom area here below the cleats is going to stay just epoxy coated. So I've taped that all off now so that I can walk on it and do whatever I need to and that it won't get any overspray. And also I'll probably end up painting the upper portions here when I do the interior. Otherwise, for the interior, I've mostly just taped off the top edges here where the decks and so forth will get installed so that these don't get paint on them. That way I'll have a better bond. All these top edges are masked off around the anchor well. Once I get the interior parts of the boat sprayed from inside the boat, and then I move outside to finish up the sole, then I can also do this area. I taped up this little hatch to the forward locker, and it's on the surface, so it's a little bigger than the opening, but the flange of the hatch will cover that just fine. So I just over tape it and then trim it with a knife pretty close to the edge. And I also masked up from the other side these 2 limbers so that overspray doesn't go through into the locker. I taped up these 2 access openings into the aftermost compartment from the forward side here as well. And that's because the paper spanned the back, but it left room for spray to get through, possibly onto the rear side of the bulkhead. So I've taped it from this side to eliminate that problem. Here is the final masking prep for high build primer on the interior of the boat. Got the hull draped with plastic that's securely taped to the rail everywhere, all the way along. This plastic will just protect the hull from overspray. That wouldn't really hurt it at this point, but it'd be something I'd have to clean up. All these bearing surfaces are taped up. This is all securely taped. Hull is completely covered, as much as it needs to be at least. And all that remains is one final solvent wash with the proprietary solvent designed for the purpose from the paint system. Here at the transom, I've masked just inside the edges here and across the top of the transom itself, even with the plywood line. Everything inside of that will be receiving paint at this time. I've got some paper across to protect that. The bottom part won't be a problem. So there's all my masking prep. It's everything that's required. And now it's just a matter of final cleanup and preparing materials and equipment. Boat is all prepped. I've solvent washed the second time with the proprietary solvent. The wipe down solvent. It's just a nice, clean, pure solvent. Kind of like paint thinner, but it's a little different. And I always use it as the last step, even though I use paint thinners and acetone when I can for interim wash downs. I always end with the proprietary one, figuring it's there to take away any contaminants possibly left behind by the cheaper solvents. I'll do a tack off right before paint, and otherwise we're ready to go with this. I'd love to do it right now, but I need to heat the shop up, and that takes an overnight. It's radiant floor heating, which is why it takes a long time to respond. But it'll heat up by tomorrow morning to the temperature I want. I keep it cool in here most of the time. My working temperature is usually 50 to 55 in the winter, which is a good working temperature for me, and it's plenty good for epoxy and regular paints and varnish. But when I do the spray, I crank it up to about 70, which helps it cure faster so that I can get in and do my multiple coats in as short a time as possible. That gives me about an hour between coats. And when it's a two-stage process like this, it means it'll take me about 5 to 6 hours elapsed time to paint this. And next time you see this, it's going to be painted.